So welcome to the afternoon section of this fabulous day that Ron Janix and Jordan Pease have put together with the observation deck. It's a real pleasure to be included in this, to be helpful in getting this information out, because the Travis story is very complex and really has a lot of important pieces to it. So I'm really thrilled and honored as a filmmaker to be here with some of my great mentors and great friends. We have James Fox, who has made numerous incredible documentary films. Out of the Blue, I Know What I Saw, The Phenomenon, all top-rated, fabulous productions that really help people get a sense of the bigger picture of the UFO story. And we have Ron James in the bottom corner, as I see him. Ron and I have been working together, I think, since 2009, when we first shot an interview with Danny Sheehan and Rich Dolan, which was really an incredible experience. You could have heard a pin drop in the room, and that was so synchronistic. It's a story I can tell one day if people are interested. And my dear friend from Philadelphia, whom has mentored me and has helped me as a filmmaker continuously, Bob Terrio. Bob is a co-producer on the Travis film, as is Ron James, but I never probably would have been brave enough to start this project if it hadn't been for Bob. I approached him because we were doing, for about 15 years, we've been filming programs in Philadelphia that I've been doing. I host regular free educational programs at my local library, and out-of-the-box topics like UFOs and sometimes health and wellness and the bee collapse and precognition and, life after death issues. I mean, we go all over the place. And Bob has started to film them, said, Jen, this is a real educational thing. Let's film these and put these up online. So we've been working together for years, but realized we had mutual friends and contacts. We were both sort of working with Linda Howe on the side, doing some film work with her. So I'm really honored to have all of these filmmakers here. And of course, my dear friend, Peter Robbins, who also was the real inspiration for me to work with Travis, because I was assisting Peter at one of the Roswell conferences, running that in 2010, I believe it was, and Travis was one of the speakers. So we all went out for dinner, and Peter and I were saying to Travis, your story and your event is certainly as big and as significant as the Roswell event, and you should be hosting these little conferences in Heber or Snowflake or Holbrook. It could be a real economic boom, because gosh, there's now 10,000 people that were coming to Roswell in 2010 for that weekend conference, and it became a real economic impact for the town. So we said to Travis, let's stir the soup pot with you. We'll mentor, we'll help, we'll do whatever we can. And Peter introduced us. And that's actually, I'll just give this little caveat, that's actually how this whole documentary film got started, as Bob will attest to, because we kind of made a couple of different productions. Bob made a production called Tracking Skyfire, which was our first attempt at trying to establish the ground basis of Travis's story. Because when we started to plan the conference, Travis had this brainy idea of taking 75, 150 people up to the forest, which is at 7,000 feet in the dark, to have a real experience about what he, went through. And I'm thinking to myself, as a conference coordinator, insurance, libel, lawsuits, people getting lost, people getting bit by snakes, people tripping. People come to a conference and they're not all really able to walk 45 minutes through the forest over logs at night.
You forgot to mention Bigfoot too.
Yeah, Bigfoot, right?
Yeah.
There's coyotes up there. There's, there's wild horses, there's bears, there's all sorts of stuff. It's like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. And
don't forget buses getting bogged down in the mud and having to call industrial tow trucks.
Right. I just figured, this is going to be a disaster. What if it snows? We can't go up there. And Travis, I thought, was just being really naive. So I said to Bob, we better have a film as a backup. Let's go up there, take all the guys up there, walk around, film the place. And then when it snows, we'll have this to show, or when it's too freaking cold to take people up there, and there's no bathroom, right? So what do people do when they have to go? They're going to go try to walk around behind a cliff or hide. And then what happens if they get lost, right? And then they can't find their way back. And so that's how this whole thing started. So I want to welcome everyone and let you make your own opening comments now that I've introduced everyone. And whoever wants to go first. I think we don't have an official format, although I have asked Ron Janix to text and ask the audience what they would like to hear from us. So we're going to chit chat and talk a little bit about filmmaking before we get questions from the audience. So who wants to go next? James, do you want to go next?
Peter, I think it's on you.
I guess it is. Working on the film for me was very peripheral. This was something that Jennifer was the primary person on to the 10th power, and that Bob was right there with her all the time. In my mind, what I hoped would be the result of the documentary that turned out to be the multiple award-winning Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, was not so much that it would be a really outstanding UFO documentary, but that it would be a really outstanding documentary. And for me, you think of your favorite documentary filmmakers in terms of popular culture in America, the last number of decades. Ken Burns certainly has been at the top of the pack. And one of the things for me that's a hallmark of Burns' documentary is that even if the subject of the documentary is not of primary interest to you, it is so well researched and so well documented, and the production values are so good, and the cutaway images are so timely that you have this almost subliminal education about everything in the context of what the subject is about. Perfect example for me is his terrific documentary on baseball. My interest and passion in this sport peaked at about 11 years old and has been on a decline since then. And that was actually several years ago. But watching that documentary is a marvel. You get so much about what was going on around it and the forces that shaped it. Jennifer intuitively is a filmmaker, and Bob, who kind of is hooked into her brain on some invisible wire that I've yet to scientifically establish, that they kept returning to Arizona. And as is the case when you're working on a book manuscript, or as you know, Jamie, your feature-length documentary Phenomena, which covers the subject, but in so many aspects, you're onto one tangent, you're completely passionate about it, and you hit a point where you realize, here's something that comes off from there that I need to know more about. And you do give yourself a crash course in that. You go to locations, you interview people. The fact that what Jennifer and Bob ended up with after 5 years was like this tapestry of Travis, the men who were with him, their family's experience, what it was like at that point in the 1970s in rural Arizona, what it was like to be in law enforcement and be presented with a challenge like this. Sheriff Gillespie, who for me emerges as one of the most distinguished and credible figures in a pantheon of great talking heads in the film, off camera had told Jennifer when she asked him and Bob whether at the time he took the story at all seriously. And he kind of shocked them by saying very much so, and then went on to describe an incident that he had had not that long before. Driving, was it Jennifer, with his daughter or daughter-in-law in another car, and they encountered a UFO in the desert, and I think she went off the road. And his basic reflections on it was, you have to understand, I'm a law enforcement officer in so many words, a very macho state. I can't have people thinking I believe in flying saucers. And on a certain level, I know it's true. Jennifer asked him if he'd be interested in commenting on this off camera, on camera. And he said he'd think about it, and passed in his sleep some months later. So we lost that.
Oh gosh, I hate when that
Yeah,
happens.
exactly. But the locations, the wonderful drone footage, our knowledge about the Sitgraves National Forest, which for me, going out there with Travis and others, going back to that location, having him take us through the whole thing right there, being with some of the guys who were with him, being with some of the guys who he grew up with. And then because of the terrible forest fire there a couple of decades ago, you can still see some real vistas through there that you couldn't have seen at the time. And you get a sense of how deep in the wilderness you are. The Sitgraves National Forest, I don't know, it's like 500,000 acres, and it covers parts of 3 states. It's massive. And allowing you to put your head in the mindset, and then bringing in people like Ben Hansen, a retired FBI profiler, to give us an analysis of the odds of that many men conspiring in a complex lie, and not just passing a lie detector test, a polygraph administered by the best in the business, I should say, successfully, but doing it repeatedly. The scientific analysis of the evidence, bringing in people like Kathleen Marden, one of our, to put it mildly, international experts on abduction, and so on. When it was done, I couldn't have been prouder of Jennifer or Bob, but it occurred to me that this is one of those things, like Phenomena, Jamie, where you had a shot at breaking through that curtain of the choir, the people that are always interested in UFOs, and doing what we all want to do, and reaching a much wider audience. One of the reasons I've been so gratified to learn that, one of the byproducts of the pandemic is people are home more, they're watching more TV, hopefully quality TV. And, I remember your disappointment, Jamie, when the circumstances did not allow it to open in theaters, which would have been historic, but how popular it became around the world because so many people were shut in. Same with this. I could go on, but for me, the power of that documentary to silence the nonsensical what if theories that have maybe also in this kind of claustrophobic time where people have too much time to think about idiotic stuff as well as smart stuff, all beginning with the idea of what if it was the light from the fire tower 3.9 miles away, and this light going on just at the right moment in the darkness by this unnamed Confederate who had climbed the stairs with a very heavy set of lighting, and then bending light to go over the ridge almost 4 miles away. That's more amazing than a UFO over the clearing, as far as I'm concerned. But again, Travis's story has stood the test of time. And the fact that he was forced into the public light and then basically took it as his responsibility to remain a public person in this work. And more than probably he even realizes, giving other people who have had maybe less sensational and certainly less publicized contact and abduction experiences that extra bit of courage to go forward and say it happened to me too. That is the beginning of how things change. Before I relinquish the floor, I'm remembering a wonderful quotation that I love from a Nobel Prize winning physicist named Max Planck, I think in the 1930s. And in terms of something being accepted that is so radical in its moment, the quote is, I think word for word, "Science progresses one funeral at a time." And it can be actual or allegorical death. We move forward as a new generation embraces more radical or more complex, challenging ideas than the previous generation was able to really wrap its head around and normalize for themselves. Better to attack the messenger It can't be, therefore it isn't, therefore it must be something else. Therefore, you've got it wrong. I relinquish the chair.
Thanks, Peter. I'll just add to just a little bit of clarification. Both Marlon Gillespie and Deputy Ellison said, they just offered, they said, if you turn off your camera, we'll tell you what our sightings have been. And that was amazing to me. I didn't necessarily expect that. I certainly didn't expect it from Deputy Ellison, but both of them told me they've had multiple experiences and they just told me the most significant ones.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was really mind blowing. So we can go in any direction. I wanted to bring attention to the fact that Bob Terrio did this excellent production called Tracking Skyfire. And it's so interesting because everything he went over, it was almost as if he'd planned this before these new debunkers arrived on scene, because the new debunkers were challenging all the facts, the roads they drove, whether or not there were hounds, what time they were where, what they possibly saw. And he produced this piece, which kind of started out the day in front of Mike Rogers' house, where the truck drove, who we pick up, what the route they drove, and it kind of sets it all, for the record, long before these debunkers showed up. So I want to introduce Bob Terrio and turn the floor over to you. Since we don't have direction from Ron, I'll take charge.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I just want to say one of the greatest values and rewards of being a filmmaker are the people you get to work with and some of the incredible people you get to meet in the production of some of these incredible documentaries. And Jennifer is truly one of the most talented and wonderful producers I've had. Such a great opportunity to get to know as a friend and to work with. Some of the most interesting things that I've had to work on in my whole career have been as a result of Jennifer and her producing these incredible documentaries. And when I first heard of the Travis story, I had been a year out of college, and I was working on producing a documentary for the Edgar Cayce Foundation about his life and work. And I remember hearing about it in the news, and at the time, it fascinated me. And in the back of your head, you kind of, as a researcher and documentary person, I said, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful someday if I could meet him and try to investigate this in some way. And here we were back in 2013, spending several days with Travis and some of the other, the logging people involved, and retracing the routes and standing on the very spot where everything happened. And it was like a dream come true. And when you spend time with these people, you can read all the books, you can look at the documentaries and hear the lectures, but when you actually sit and share meals with them and drive with them and spend time with them, you realize that this is all very real, that this is not staged. They're not doing this to be famous, they're doing it to be rich. It's an event that truly happened. And
you think about all the things they have to lose and what they have to gain.
There you go.
Much more to lose.
Yeah.
I remember when I talk with really fascinating witnesses that have had extraordinary experiences, I close my eyes and I allow their words to recreate the visuals in my mind. And it for me, it's a better way of some people have photographic memory, but it allows me to experience what happened, what they experienced through their eyes, right? And when I met with Travis for the first time, 10 or 11 years ago, I got to go to dinner with him, just the two of us. And I said, Travis, I just found the napkin that he drew the object for me at the dinner table. Just found it yesterday, funny enough. I said, Travis, I hate to say this because I know you experience this daily, but could you just walk me through every detail of the experience? And I'm going to sit here quietly and I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to listen to your story so flippin' carefully, and I closed my eyes and there he went. And it was this amazing journey. And I've met a lot of witnesses around the world. I really have. And I look for telltale signs of any indication of a hoax, fabrication, exaggeration. And I never, not one, not even 0.0001% of me. And I'm quite skeptical. I don't believe things just because others do, or it's, I look into things pretty deeply, and having gone to the site with Travis on a couple of occasions, met some of the other witnesses. I wish I could have met more. I remember tracking down this other witness that was with Travis, and he was working at, I think, a Walgreens. And I went into Walgreens and I caught him at work, and he's like, look, I'm kind of busy right now. But I said, could you just give me a couple minutes just between him, and there were no cameras rolling or anything. And God, he started to describe that incident in the evening, and his eyes lit up. Like, just, he was there. I put him back in that. And he goes, have you ever seen like a brand new Corvette? Just like how perfect it is. Like, it's so flawless. I said, yeah. And he goes, it was better than that. I just thought, wow, what a wonderful description. I just always think back at that and seeing Travis's reaction at the site. It was just, he deserves 10 Oscars if the guy is lying, and have all the support of the other witnesses. And look, you get really, really compelling. There are a lot of cases that I don't find particularly compelling. There are a handful of close encounters of the third kind that I find, the top of the top, and Travis is one of them. And I'd stick to my guns on that one forever. I think the more compelling and the more, the word I'm looking for, it's one thing to differentiate, you've got objects in the sky, and then you got coming in contact with beings, right? So it either happened and we're not alone, or it didn't happen. And for the skeptics, you either debunk it or you have to accept that we're not alone. There's no in between. Do you know what I mean? Like with a sighting like the Tic Tac one, as compelling as it is, there were no beings involved. One can say, well, perhaps it was a super secret this, or Russian, or China, or, but with Travis's account, it's one or the other, period. Right? So the skeptics have to debunk those kind of cases, because otherwise they have to admit that we're not alone. So it's par for the course in my opinion. It's unfortunate, but I think we are seeing some fairly significant steps in the right direction.
No question.
I want to say something about Ron and introduce Ron when we bring him in. Ron came into the project at a critical time. I know James is familiar with this scenario. I had agreed and had a licensing to use some footage that Stanton Friedman actually connected me with. He was part of a documentary project in 1978 with a kind of a B-movie producer named Brandon Chase out of Hollywood at that time. And there was excellent archive footage from the late 70s, and we wanted to use it. So I negotiated and sort of tried to, get email agreement and verbal phone agreement that we could use this footage. And I was working on a deadline trying to get this film into the Open Minds International UFO Film Festival in February of 2015, because I knew that would be like 7-8 months before the November event. And we wanted to run a conference, and we wanted to promote the conference with the documentary film. So I was, struggling to get this contract, and Brandon would never give me a contract. So finally I wrote a contract for him. Well, I used his footage and had the film ready to go for the film festival. And I get this letter back from this producer telling me I couldn't use his footage. And the film festival was next week. And I was like, shoot, do I pull the film? What do I do? And you know, Ron was a godsend. He went over and hounded this guy and knocked on his door and said, look, can you give us something? Because we're going to put it in a film festival. And as
I forgot that story. That's
You
pretty
remember
bad.
that?
Yeah, we had to
Oh my
literally track the guy down.
goodness.
He had Parkinson's disease. He wouldn't come out of the room. He was literally on his last leg, and his wife takes the paperwork in there because I just wouldn't leave and gets a signature.
Yeah, but you know what?
Did you bring a couple of guys named Guido with you, or?
I didn't. You know, I went over there on my best behavior, but I wasn't leaving without a signature.
And he gave me a signature. This is incredible, James. It was on a napkin. He wrote,
Oh my
he
God.
wrote an agreement for me on a napkin, and it said I couldn't make any money on the film. I couldn't ever put it in a theater. I could only show it at a film festival or a UFO conference, and I had to show it for free. I mean, this is how he wrote a contract. I mean, like, are you kidding me? Now, he didn't say I couldn't stream it online. So I did for a while, you know, until I actually remade the film. But so I had to pull his footage and put in other footage and go looking for it. And it was a terribly stressful time because while this was all going on, I lost my mother-in-law. So I was in the hospital and she was dying, and I'm on the phone with Stanton and he's trying to negotiate. And Stanton said, I told you he was kind of a real son of a gun, and, you know, he might kind of, you know, pull the knife out from behind his back at the last minute, which is what he did. And it was just really disappointing. But Ron really kind of came to the rescue and said, look, you know, and really leveled with me. And you'll understand this as a filmmaker. He said, you know, you can either go after him and like use your emails and try to sue him because he's kind of backing out of a verbal and email agreement he's already given you, or you can just spend the money to go buy other footage. You don't really want to take people into court if you can avoid it. And I just went looking for other footage and found it. And then that gave me the opportunity to kind of like, well, where can I tweak this film? Where can I make it a little better? So Ron approached me and said, Jen, you know, like, we can get creative. Like, you're a costumer, you know, like, I've got green screen. Like, let's kind of like
do the famous low budget reenactment. Yeah.
I flew out to California. Actually, I flew to Arizona and then drove to California with a girlfriend, and we took all of our supplies with us, and we had bought costumes and wigs and, you know, got blue suits and made them, and bought, you know, scuba boots and tried to make the costume that Travis described and that Mike Rogers had painted for him. And it was kind of quite a creative week. I think Ron and I butt heads a little bit because we're both kind of similar personalities. And I was like, did you get that painted yet? Come on, like, you know, we got to get this done. Ron was
the most winging it special effects sequence ever. For those of you who've been in the seminar for a while, it was the very first thing we showed, that reenactment with Travis. And it didn't make it in its entirety into the final film. It just used bits and pieces. So that kind of stands as a standalone piece. But it was a lot of fun to make. We made it for like nothing. So, well, a little bit, next to nothing would be a better phrase.
That's right. I mean, you built incredible stuff, and you hired an actor, and, you know, sure, it cost us, you know, anything costs you a couple $1,000s when you're trying to do it. And you got a couple of hotel room expenses and gas expenses and, you know, props and paint and all that. But it was really a creative process, and I was very grateful to do that. So, and Ron and I have been working together and sort of stirring the soup pot, creating a visual platform for MUFON, because we saw that it really needed that. And I had been involved in MUFON for a long time. And Ron, I had written a business plan for it, and so had Ron. And finally one day we said, well, let's look at each other's plans. You know, maybe we can, you know, like, get this off the ground. And Ron has done an incredible job really launching a streaming platform for MUFON, which was needed. And so I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to work so closely with Ron. And he's also a mentor. I constantly learn things from Ron and vice versa. We kind of bounce stuff off each other and use each other as a guide and a barometer, and say, well, what do you think about this? You know, so
Jen and I first did the Disclosure Dialogues. That was a 5-disc set that won the EBE Awards in, I think, 2012. It was about it was all about all the stuff that's happening right now. And then after that, we did I produced a citizen hearing on disclosure with Steve Bassett. And then Jen and I worked together on the Travis piece, and we worked together on developing MUFON Television, which is really where I'm parked right now. Is MUFON TV has become the largest commercial-free repository data-based UFO information that's out there. There's nothing else like it. And we do original shows there, and kind of plow along that way. And then I've got another film that's coming up. I can't talk about it too much, but I wanted to mention there's some questions in the room. People are talking about, kind of wanting to know more about the Travis thing, and they're wanting to know more about the filmmakers, what kind of advice we can give people that are trying to do it. So I just have a couple minutes. Let me first say something about Travis. Over the time, I've really gotten to know this guy. He's been to my house. He's stayed the night. We've played guitar together. We hang out. We're working on projects. And, you really get to know somebody on a personal level. And what a lot of people don't know about Travis is that there is a whole other guy besides this person that we met in the panel that had this experience. Travis has had a very successful life. Compared to what happens to a lot of experiencers, Travis has done pretty well for himself. He has a huge family. He's managed to retire from a job, own his house. He's doing okay. He doesn't benefit in any major way from going out and being Travis Walton. There's never been a huge upside for him to do this. And he's coming from a place of this really happened, and I'll share my story. But there's nothing about this thing that he needs to be the whole person that is Travis Walton. A lot of people don't know. And so when people question his story or they ask me if I really believe him, I'm like, look, I know him personally. And I also know that he is a solid freestanding individual outside of all of this. And it's very important that people know that. I don't think that many people do. So that's the thing that I would have to say about Travis, especially in the light of all this stuff that's going on right now. And then as far as advice for filmmakers, maybe we could do another circle. I would just say, somebody's asking if you could make a documentary with no budget. It's harder and harder now. You could never make a documentary with no budget that was going to get anywhere beyond YouTube. And now it's even more difficult. And
one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that you could finish a doc and you could sell that doc. And then you have to make what I call deliverables. And I say that because making deliverables is, I remember I was making a sale, and you're always at the end of your rope and you're broke and you borrowed money from all your friends and maxed out your credit cards. It happens that way every time. And I made this $500,000 sale to A&E. And that's like, granted, I was $378,000 in debt at the time. So, but still, and I had other investors to pay off, but hey, I was quite excited. And a friend of my father's, who's a very famous editor, named Walter Murch, he did Apocalypse Now and English Patient. And he came over, and he's this very distinguished guy. And he says, "Oh, James, so very congratulations." He says, "Good luck with deliverables." I thought, what does this guy know that I don't? And, people don't realize you have a film that's done, and then you have to spend another $50,000, $100,000 just delivering the movie. It's like you make a sale on a house you buy, and someone says, "Okay, great, we're going to give you $1 million for the house. But before we do that, I want you to replace the foundation, put a new roof on, and remodel the kitchen." And that's all on you. You'll get your money back once but it's the same thing. It's like, we want your audio this, we want your black levels, we want this. It's like, we want a stereo mix, we want a discrete audio channels mix, we want a text version, a textless version, an HD version, a standard def version, and for me, it's like, oh my God. Yeah.
Not to mention foreign languages, closed captioning, and different file formats.
My
God. And understanding the codex requirements for like color correction blew me away.
Yeah.
Actually,
Sorry, mosquito.
A while back, Bob Terrio and I and Peter Robbins had the pleasure of working with, with Larry Landsman and another producer named John Terrio, and we were shooting a television series called First Contact, and it actually got greenlit by Skyfire. I was quite excited. This was going to be, 3 ufologists traveling the country in an RV. It was going to be Stanton Friedman, Rich Dolan, and Peter Robbins, and our first episode was the 1952 and 2002 flyovers over the White House or in the Capitol. And we were very excited about it. And then, I also got the book, of the deliverables. And I said, what? I don't even think I have computer equipment big enough to do that. And it ended up not flying because Sci-Fi was in a budget crunch, and they dropped our project in the trash when they changed their name and they refinanced, and we could never finagle our way back into to really getting it done. And of course,
is that the one where the producer wanted Stanton Friedman to run through the woods being chased by a flying saucer?
Yeah, I mean, there was some of the people at Sci-Fi really liked the production of Ghost Hunters, and they wanted to kind of draw on some of that, and they wanted to actually possibly hoax in some UFO footage. And I said, oh, no, I didn't bring these people in with that intention. They would feel I've deceived them. I had very good close relationships with everyone. And these guys make a living speaking at UFO conferences and rely on the credibility of their research. And to then hoax things, I don't think they're going to go for that. I think you're going to lose them really quick.
I think that's the epitome of creative differences. Can you imagine seeing a show where Stanton Friedman is being chased by a fake flying saucer and he's like okay with that?
I miss Stanton Friedman so much.
I know.
I dedicated the film to him, and I have a photograph of him in my office, the two of us together in South America. And
Yeah.
I cherish it so much. And the time I had with him, I remember we were sitting on a restaurant that were outside that spilled out onto the sidewalk in a place called Peruibe. I think it's about 3 hours south of Sao Paulo. And there's an island that you can see right off the shore. I don't remember the name of the island, but it had a rare snake. In fact, it was such a rare snake, it wasn't seen anywhere else. Its venom is worth a lot of money. And these poachers, but they're all protected. These poachers would go to the island, and the snakes would drop out of the trees and kill the poacher. I mean, it was like they were extremely. Anyway, so we were all kind of outside talking about this island in Peruibe, and we could see the island, and this. It was like a promenade, and people would drive their cars and mopeds by as we were eating chocolate pizza on the sidewalk. And this car drove by with really loud rap music, and it had a huge bass in the trunk, and it was just boom, 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 really loud. Like, I mean, it disrupted all of our conversation. It was like, it went, and Stanton looked at me and he goes, well, that frequency doesn't bode well with me.
Yeah, we could spend the rest of our time together trading Stanton stories. I know. Lucky enough to first hear him speak in 1978 at the UN, but it was another 10 years before we really connected and began what was for me a wonderful friendship and mentorship and colleagueship. But in 1987, Philip Klass had just published his book, UFO Abductions, A Dangerous Game, and had, how can I say, enticed me to be interviewed by him after hearing me speak at the MUFON Symposium in Washington, D.C. Ultra mega respectful. There was like a slime trail behind him that a snail leaves. And I thought, I'm going to be the one to convince him. Talked to him about my sister's abduction. And he wrote me a letter after I have finished the book. I will send you what they used to call the blues in the old publishing industry. It's double-spaced type blue in blue ink for final corrections. And he sent me this thing, and essentially he had taken my sister's and my sighting, the most shattering visual experience of our lives, and reduced us to kind of cartoon characters, two children who had overactive imaginations and wanted to feel special. Well, I wanted to make him feel special, but I could not do it in the way I wanted, and I fumed. And ultimately, it appeared in the book right next to the chapter taking down Travis. So that was a wonderful connection for us. But I'm sitting in the green room before a show called Lifetime, a big talk show in Canada back in the 80s, certainly, and just kind of brooding. And at a certain point, I see somebody in front of me, and I look up, and it's him with a very furrowed brow looking at me. And Stanton could furrow that brow quite dramatically. He said, "What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing. What's wrong?" And I tell him this story. And as I finish it, his face kind of goes from to, and he sticks out his hand. I look at him. He says, "Congratulations, you're nobody in this business until you've been attacked by Phil." So that was an up for me. But I wanted to follow up on something that first that Jen had said, and then Ron had said, working on this pilot episode for what would have been a TV series called First Contact. Of every project I've ever worked on, which has not come to fruition, which, come to think of it, has been the great majority of them. As we know, you give it a shot, but usually it's not picked up. That this is the one that I would have loved to have seen most. Imagine you getting to drive all over the United States in a huge tour bus with a small staff, looking into UFO events with Stanton Friedman and Rich Dolan. I was looking forward to this. And it came to the fact that we weren't going to be able to do it. I thought one of the things that we lost was John Dioria, associate producer on it. He found a diner just outside of Philadelphia, a classic stainless steel diner built in 1947 and in perfect condition. And he went to the owner. He said, we're working on this idea for a series. I've got this idea. It would be great to use it as sort of our bat cave, the place we keep coming back to at night. And what would it take to get that to happen? He said, basically, you mean my diner would be like on TV? I said, yeah. He said, we only serve breakfast and lunch. After that, it's yours. I'll give you the keys, and we set up monitors on the counters. We went back there. It's all in that wonderful pilot episode. And that was the one that got away for me. But following up on what you said, Ron, on the other dimensions to a public person. When I first met Travis in the early 90s, speaking at a conference that he was speaking at, and Mike Rogers, the same conference, in Connecticut, I had read his book when it came out in 1979. And I was in awe, kind of a fanboy. But over the years, as our acquaintanceship became a friendship and then a good friendship, we spoke together more and more. When the documentary came out, we pretty much toured together, sometimes with Jennifer, sometimes without. And ultimately, I had told him that my dad, who passed about 3 years ago at the age of 98 years and 7 months, tragically snatched from us, who was a dear friend of Jennifer's and very interested in this subject. Rich Dolan was a friend of his. He had dinner in London with Nick Pope. He read the books. He was just pissed off he had never seen a UFO. But he said the person who he respected most in it was Travis Walton. And Travis came to visit. Jennifer and I had arranged for him to speak at a local theater. And he spent the afternoon here with my dad and the rest of us. And it was a really important event for my dad. And I know Travis really had a rough time when my dad passed because he loved him. They had a real friendship. Also, one thing about Travis is he's incredibly well read. You can make generalizations about, you grew up in a small town in Arizona, so I don't expect, you've read great literature. Well, he has, and the philosophers, and he speaks about them with great literacy. Also, there was a stopover period where he had given a talk in Jersey, had a few days to kill before speaking for Jennifer's group in just outside of Philadelphia. And I asked him if he had ever been to my hometown of New York City. And he said, of course, but just in and out of the airports, he had never really had a sense of the city. I borrowed a friend's apartment, dear friend Georgie, and we had a wonderful view of the Empire State Building. And for 2 days, I walked his ass off all over New York City, and we had a ball. And he took the whole thing in like a human sponge. And like Bob said, the best thing in this work, not just in documentary filmmaking, but in this specialty area of research, investigation, public speaking, is the people you're fortunate enough to get to meet, and in some cases, the extraordinary places you get to go. So it's not a great way to make a living, folks, but boy, oh boy, stuff like this is priceless. It's priceless.
Hey guys, we're running out of time, and there's something that I really wanted to say. So if you could just give me a minute, I want to get this across. Because of what's happened in the media and the last couple of years, and what's been disclosed to the public, and more importantly, what hasn't been disclosed to the public, we as filmmakers have an obligation now that is greater than it's really ever been, because the public in general has been spoon-fed a brand new narrative that is going to make it very easy for a whole lot of very important facts to go by the wayside and escape the attention of the average person out there. And the story that they're being told and the reality that they're going to be asked to accept is completely different than the reality that a lot of us know exists. And so as filmmakers, it is not time to sit on our laurels and say, hey, this is great. We've got some disclosure. Let's do that. It is time to really start pushing the people that are attempting to control the narrative, demanding the truth now as more than ever before, and just not taking the same spoon-fed recycled stuff that we're being fed again. I've got a film coming out the first part of the year. It's going to be a pretty big release. I can't talk too much about it, but I can tell you that one of the opening lines in the film is I'm sitting alone in a room with a guy whose resume includes interrogating terrorists at Guantanamo Bay. And all I can think about is how I can get him to tell me something he doesn't want me to know. And I've been approaching that form of interviewing for 15 years now, with a lot of high up people that I've managed to kind of take everything that they've said and weave it into a story that actually tells us a truth that they either won't or can't share. And we need to demand that. We need to start really looking at the moral implications of the fact that you can sit here in a room with me, look at me eye to eye, and I know that you have information that would help me shape my journey as a human being, my own self-evolution, my own development of my own spirit, and my understanding of why I'm here. You do not have the right to deny me that knowledge. And that is just the truth. It's like I interviewed James and he said the same thing. He says, we have a right to this knowledge. And I think as filmmakers, we have to turn up the heat. We're still not getting enough. We're still not getting the truth. And we need to be courageous, and we need to be for the truth and nothing else. And that's a tough battle, but it has to be fought. And that's why if you're a filmmaker in this field and it's not getting harder for you right now, then you're not answering the call.
We're not gonna take it.
That's right.
No, we're not gonna take
I'm
it.
angry. So I'm just saying, man, it's time. We as filmmakers, we owe all of you our best efforts to get the truth out, and we're still not being fed it. We're just being fed a new version of the same old story, and we're going to continue.
Amen.
Right on. Well, I've got a dinner engagement, so I can't thank you guys enough for inviting me on the panel. And, you know, for Travis, I will make the time every time. So I not only consider him a friend, but I consider him one of the most compelling witnesses I've ever met with.
I think we all agree.
James, thank you very much for being here for Travis. We appreciate, and he appreciates your support, and we feel the same way. So thanks a lot for showing up.
Thanks you guys for thinking of me.
Before James takes off, I just want to also thank James, because James actually gave me some pointers on the Travis film. I followed some of them. I really couldn't afford to follow all of them. My budget didn't quite align myself, but I really appreciate that, James, and I will keep a line out to you for advice in the future, if you're willing. As I work on this compendium piece.
So did you follow my advice of contacting Steven Spielberg, or did you follow my advice? What were...
So you remember when we had the screening of the film?
Yeah, I know. I'm totally kidding. Of course I do.
Yeah. We're watching a screening in Heber at the barn where Travis decided to have the first conference, which is a crazy place to have the conference. I mean, if you had the first year, there really wasn't even a bathroom there. So if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to go into the horse stall, walk over the horse manure, and, use the back of the barn. It was just a crazy place to have a conference, but.
I remember I brought Jennifer the cut of the movie. I arrived in Heber with it. It was the one that I worked on that had the full reenactment. And I remember that they started playing it, and I looked back in the corner of the room, and James is back there taking notes. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm dead.
Both of us. We're watching the film, getting text advice from James while we're watching.
Yeah, he was texting her during the movie, and I'm just like, oh, this is not going to be good.
Oh.
But,
we had a couple problems. We had an audio overlay, and we had a non, like a video dropout on, that and stuff like that. But that's what happens when you kind of throw stuff together really quick. It's hard to do the work.
Tough.
Well,
It's tough to make a shorter film than it is a longer film.
you got it. You got it.
Having to kill your darlings is one of the most painstaking processes. I had to do it with the phenomenon multiple times. It was
Chris
One time
O'Brien
I remember having to-
helping me, and he
I
told
closed
me
my eyes and I highlighted the whole section and I hit the delete and it was like, oh God.
The same thing as writing a major
editing.
book.
God.
I just put it in another sequence somewhere. I just like, no, get rid of it. We're
painful.
just going to put it over here. We're going to put it in another little document. Maybe I can use it later. And that's really what the compendium film is all about. It's those things like thought, oh, that's so
I-
good. I'm gonna use
I've got
that.
extras. Yep. No,
Yeah,
I know
you
that.
make another film. I often say to people ask me about editing, and I say, I edit with my eyes closed, and they go, what? You edit with your eyes closed? What are you talking about? Well, you listen. You have to listen for the narrative. You have to listen for the story. Then you find the visuals that make the story right. But it's got to really make sense in terms of the dialogue. You have to be able to listen to the film as if it was like an audio or radio show first. And if it makes sense that way, and your people you interviewed tell your narrative, it's much better than inserting yourself in and saying, well, I didn't get anybody to say this, but I'm going to say this and interject this here. Then it becomes a vanity piece. And it's, it's like, it's a little tricky. You do a really good job of inserting yourself, and it's never a vanity piece, James, really.
Well,
I
thank you
admire-
guys. I'm going to run. I can't thank you all enough. It's been a
Thanks
real
again,
pleasure.
man.
Wonderful
Bye,
seeing you,
everybody.
Jamie.
Bye.
We're gonna
Bye,
play a
everybody.
quick video clip right now. Clip number 7. Vic, if you want to go ahead and fire that up, it's real quick. It's about 2 minutes. It's Jennifer and Travis.
Part of the disclosure movement, Travis, and anyone who gets the chance to meet you and work with you and read your book and hear you speak gets the sense of your own integrity and personal authenticity to your story. And I've been very humbled to have the pleasure to work with you.
Well, you're an important part of disclosure. I think educating the public, preparing them for this, to where it's not such a shock and not so disruptive. There's 2 schools of thought on disclosure. We demand government public acknowledgement and confirmation today, and other people who feel that it might be wise to break it to them gently.
Yeah, well, I think both are needed. A slow, gradual awareness as you begin to expand your perspective. Many people I know within the MUFON organization are involved in the Mutual UFO Network because they've had sightings. And once you have a sighting, and you realize you weren't alone, or you have a sighting with a couple of other people, it can be verified. It's a life-shattering and life-changing experience.
Okay.
I describe it as an analogy, where you have a balloon, you blow it up and you poke a hole in the balloon and it flies all over the room, right? You can't put the air back in the balloon. You can't put your reality back in the same way that it was before.
Well, 40 years ago, it was generally recognized that people who believed that there could be life out there were kooks. But now we're reaching a tipping point. The people who think that we're alone, that's the definition of a kook. Somebody who believes something that is contrary to known facts.
Agreed.
All right. Yeah, Peter, do you want to comment on that?
Just that last observation of Travis's, that in this day and age, where even the most conservative earth scientist or absolutely dyed-in-the-wool anti-UFO astronomer absolutely understands beyond any doubt that we have some millions of sun-sized stars with planetary systems or planets approximately the size of Earth and about the same distance away to, let's say, if you are a person of faith, to establish the miracle of creation as we know it. If you're a scientist, a pragmatist, an agnostic, to accept that the basic building blocks of primordial life to establish that first one-celled animal, moving around in the ooze, and it's all up from there, that the most absurd idea is that we are alone in the universe. That's beyond laughable. It's willful ignorance is what it is. And if we're not alone, it's also, for me, extremely naive to think, okay, there's one other, intelligent, evolved civilization well beyond us, and they come and go with impunity and advanced technology, but there's only one. I think that's as naive as just saying there's none.
What do you guys think it's going to take to get a credible case like this more widely accepted?
I think education is going to have a lot to do with it. And the disclosure movement per se is proving itself not to be, some overnight wonder of enlightenment. It's about education. It's people, in great part because of the hard, constant work and dedication of, and I won't say people like, because there's nobody else like Stephen Bassett, who has planted that seed in a lot of countries where there are now a lot of regional groups, can be just, 4 or 5 friends or larger meeting groups, or, startup, the different kind of groups that we have all over this country that are not necessarily associated with the big organization, but meet regularly once a month or whenever, virtually for the past year and a half, no doubt, that one person helps to educate the next. And in this day and age where the whole ridicule factor, which was deadly from 1947 on, right up until just a few years ago, as most of us know, with the ridicule diminishing, especially among professionals who would have never associated their name with it for fear of a career of destruction. And that's not just science, that's in medicine. If you're a lawyer, Lord knows if you're a politician, that as I see it from the informal demographic that I deal with of, speaking at conferences in different parts of the country and different parts of the world over the years, more and more people care less and less what other people think about what they think about this subject. And 10 years ago, a couple that took it seriously might have a pod of people in their lives that they knew they could communicate with about it, but never to just speak openly about that they took it seriously, with business colleagues or old friends or family members, even knowing that that person might feel awkward about it. And rather than just say, gee, tell me more about it, I'm, interested quietly, but just instead ridicule or ostracize them. We're in an increasingly positive climate, Ron, for people to reach out and without fear of being made fun of, to educate themselves more and more. I think one of the biggest challenges we face is all of the BS on the internet, which is such a double-edged sword. And for folks who long ago, sadly, got out of the habit of, dare I say it, reading books for pleasure or for information, and just go to the internet and Google anything. It's like the Godhead. I sometimes sit there, maybe you do too, and think of the most obscure question I can and just punch it in. How did this happen? For me, that's pretty miraculous.
Okay, this climate's better, but what about the fact that most people I talk to do not know who Travis Walton is and don't know anything about this case?
Well, that surprises me a little in that I'm a total movie maniac. And if I had never had any interest in ufology, I would know who he is because I saw Fire in the Sky, the movie. I'm not sure, there's not some grand thing other than them simply saying enough already. You're dragging your feet on this for decades. Here we are. Get used to us. The world's changing right this second. and they don't seem to be moving forward on revealing themselves en masse, although they do it every day for probably millennia to 1, 3, 7 people at a time. We're moving toward a critical mass in our populations. But I think in this work, we sometimes forget that we are still a genuine, real minority. And for some of the loudest voices in disclosure, give it to us and give it to us all now, I'm ready, I think. And the people that I network with, they're ready, I think. And they have lost a certain empathy and humanity, I think, to just drag everybody with them who is not ready, who is most folks, who are still buying the myth that, well, can probably be explained away, or people's imagination, or wanting to feel special, or mental illness, or secret to government, test planes. Almost all UFOs, as we know, are explainable in conventional terms, even if they're exotic conventional terms. But your question is the most important one. I think it's still a matter of plotting, all of us trying to do our best, keep our bars set high, not move into a cult of personality, not try to establish cults, not try to be the shiniest light on the Christmas tree by being the loudest and the most eccentric, or saying this is, as opposed to I believe this is, or I feel this is, or my research leads me to believe that this is. When I hear people say this is, I almost always have a problem. And then there's the problem of prove me wrong. It's as hard as prove me right.
I'll add to that if I can, Ron. Your question is, what is it gonna take, and what factors are important in continuing to educate the public. So I'll second what Peter is saying. It's all about education, but it's also about the way people come into their educational process. Many of them come into it because they have a sighting. There's roughly 13,000 reports of UFOs in the United States and Canada that are reported, but that's 1 in 10 get reported, sort of just like other statistics. And that means there's close to 100,000 sightings. So the fact that this craft or these beings keep showing up and keep interacting with each generation over millennia, that's a continual chipping away at the desire for education. And then what's changed in our life in the last 25 years is technology. So even with the onset of COVID, even in the last, say, 18 months or 2 years, Zoom's become something everyone can do, connecting in with groups, learning, going on sites, and also interactively now. Yes, we can sit in front of the television and watch pre-programmed things that we know we want to see on A&E or Discovery or Channel or Hulu or Crackle. I mean, the list of, programming that's out there now is crazy. But people can select what they want to watch in a way that they were never able to do before. I mean, when I grew up, there was 3, 6, and 10, and oh my gosh, now there's a public television station. Great, we suddenly have something else we can watch. Nowadays, you can literally search what you want to see, scrolling through stuff. So as more and more documentaries make it into mainstream festivals, which I was really pleased that Travis did, and as more and more people search out what they want, because they've had a sighting, or their uncle had a sighting, or their child had a sighting, or they realize they've got abduction memories and they're trying to get in touch with it, and they reach out to a group. I mean, it's a slow chipping away process. But now people can educate, like Travis was saying, like Peter was saying, they can go in and Google what they want and then find links and connections in a way they could never do before. And
Ron,
I think
I'm sorry.
that's huge.
An associated thought, Ron, is for many years, in finding your place in this work, so to say, I've seen myself as somebody who is best couching the research that I do and doing my presentations with as much reference to post-war history. For folks that are circumspect about this or are new to it, to whatever degree I can make it part of the history of our lives or our parents' lives or what have you, and ground it in real world understanding, I think I get the edge. And never more than in, I'll call it a documentary because I don't know what else to call it, that Jennifer and Bob assisted me with massively, kind of a meditation on our first Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, who I am convinced was murdered because, well, you'll have to watch the documentary for that, but it's part of the early days of the UFO cover-up. And there's a lot of sensational alleged information about Forrestal out there. I avoided it all, even though some of it may be true and would have added, some popular culture interest to my project. But there was enough on the record in published credible sources that I went with it. My point is this, I see myself more and more as an educator. I'm a public speaker and a good one. I know how to put together a PowerPoint presentation, but my goal is to get, I hope everybody that's interested in the UFOs would attend my lectures or, follow my radio show. But my highest intention is to bring folks who are somewhat circumspect and maybe new to the subject into the foyer, to the door, to the living room, and then turn them over to colleagues who are more highly specialized in their areas of study and research. Again, the best we can do as individuals in the field, filmmakers, authors, public speakers, is ground this subject in the real world. Bob, for example, he did a talk several years ago at a conference he and I and Jennifer spoke at that I'm very proud to be a co-founder of, the Exeter, New Hampshire UFO Festival and Conference that happens usually, except for the last 2 years, on Labor Day. And like me, Bob has a profound interest in the impact of popular culture on our thinking in this area. And one wonderful footnote to the whole subject of UFO information is that it was in the 90s, right, Bob, that the Disney documentary came out?
Yes, early 90s.
There you go. It was something that I had heard about in the early 90s, got to see one screening of, I think, on television, and then it disappeared forever. And it was a 100% Walt Disney project, feature-length documentary, opened up with Michael Eisner, who was the CEO of Disney at the time. It was in the early years, I think, of the Clinton presidency. We all knew Clinton had an interest, and it was so compelling and so well done and so hard to wrap your head around the fact that it was a Disney production that a lot of us felt, my gosh, maybe this is the first flag going up, because you say Disney and you bring in a lot of intergenerational interest and children and grandparents and adults and collectors of figurines and on down, the whole list of possible areas of interest. And then it was withdrawn and was never publicly screened again. And Bob did a brilliant piece of research on it. And I remember being in the audience for it, probably about 300 people in a beautiful New England town hall, which when it was brand new, Abraham Lincoln spoke in. So it has its own gravitas, and thinking a lot of these people, they come to this conference every year because it's here, but they're local folks who are not ufologists, they just have this growing interest in the subject, and they're there with their kids, their grandparents, your ladies, gardening group, the Rotarians put it on. It's really an all-American thing. And just thinking of them processing that this was Disney, and all of a sudden it has that much more power to take you where we want you to go in terms of taking the subject seriously. I wish Disney would do it again, or put that documentary into major release right now, maybe with a new introduction, change nothing else about it. That is the kind of thing that could make a difference. The same way that 3 weeks ago on Tuesday, on October 19th, in a room in the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., 4 former United States Air Force officers offered live testimony on their involvement in incidents where fully articulated disc-shaped objects came in over the nuclear weapons bases they were stationed at the height of the Cold War and turned off.
Launch codes.
They made the nuclear missiles unlaunchable. This has happened dozens of times over the decades, and yet it sounds like bad science fiction. Why don't we know about this? Well,
Right.
the Air Force and the forces that be don't tell us. And in a more insidious way, and I did a program about this on the following Monday, 2 weeks ago, with Steve Bassett and Daniel Sheehan and Lee Spiegel, who is also taking part in our event today, a brilliant journalist. And Lee pointed out something with a certain amount of anger and frustration, that the history of our government is when you do get the most credible witnesses, you ignore them, let them grow old and die. And these four men, all well into their 70s or in their 80s, they're not going to be with us forever. These are the kind of witnesses, these are the witnesses we need to get before Congress. These are the witnesses that should interest congressional representatives and senators in getting open investigations going. And yet, as usual, the media is very underattended. Ironically, you know, this thing spans all political beliefs. Fox and CNN were there, and they were doing extensive interviews, mostly with the witnesses, but with some of the rest of us in attendance as well, but not for the evening news, for documentaries and documentary series to be broadcast next year, which is the 75th anniversary of Roswell, and watch the United States media and the British media go UFO crazy again. So while things are happening, there is still this recalcitrant attitude on the part of the forces that be to hold back.
Hey, Bob, why don't you speak to that Disney event?
Yeah, in my research, the documentary was produced to help promote a new ride that was opening in Disney World called Alien Terror. And actually George Lucas helped develop the ride. And it just happened to be on a Saturday morning. I live near Philadelphia, and I saw a promotion for this coming on. And so I recorded it. There was no huge promotion. And at that point, Disney had regular programming Sunday evenings. I mean, they kind of owned Sunday evenings on ABC. But this was not part of their regular programming. It was, I understand it was only promoted or shown in 5 cities in the entire country. And it was up to the stations to decide when they were going to run them. Again, no coordinated or big promotion for it. And it's remarkable because it comes out and part of the scripting hosted by Robert Urich says, UFOs are real, and chances are in your lifetime you'll see a UFO, and alien abductions are real. And I'm watching this going, this is a Disney sponsored program, right, and they're telling us it's real. And just the thought of, if this had been properly promoted at the time, run on every ABC station on a Sunday night when everybody's watching, how different would the whole disclosure issue be right now? And this was early 90s. This was like 1991 this came out. And another interesting thing I found out in the research, at around the same time, to help promote the show, Disney World had a conference in which they invited 20 of the top UFO researchers, including Bud Hopkins and some serious guys. Again, they did not promote it. There were more researchers on stage than there were people in the audience. And this ran for almost the whole entire week. And I heard that Bud Hopkins, after about 4 days, got so disgusted, he just left without even telling him. He just left. And like, why go to the trouble of bringing all these experts, flying them in and putting them up and feeding them and having this conference?
Well, this is my frustration. Peter was talking about the Robert Salas event in Washington, D.C. I didn't see that anywhere. Did you guys see that anywhere?
Nope.
This should have been on the front page.
It should have been on every news station that night. Being in that room and listening to these men give their accounts, I was familiar with some of them, but there's nothing like being there, as they say. And what followed immediately after the Q&A was Stephen Bassett had arranged for all of the speakers and all of the invited guests to have lunch together at the National Press Club. And we must have been there for 3.5 hours of just constant conversation. I wish that could have been taped, but it was absolutely historic, and not a single congressional representative, a senator, nobody from their offices was there. However, one representative from the Pentagon Press Division was in the audience, identified himself, was very respectful of the situation, and made no bones about it. We are progressing in that area, but slowly, and Washington is still doing its best to drag its feet. Even now, with the report that came out in June, highly redacted, nothing new, and the whole thing stage managed. They have known everything there is to know since 1947. And yet the best they can do is, oh my goodness, it might be the Russians, it might be the Chinese, and who knows? Please give us a break.
Totally. Jordan and Kate were both at that event, as you know, Peter. They were.
Yes.
And Danny Sheehan was there. And I didn't see this anywhere. It's amazing.
I will add a little bit about, just making a comment about what will it take for this to kind of get out there. It's going to take a person like, say, a Peter Jennings or a Dan Rather, or a Walter Cronkite.
Do an ABC thing years ago.
Yes, he did. Dan Rather did some pieces too. So did Walter Cronkite. They took an interest in this. So it takes. I would say it helps if you have a major media person who comes forward, because even though they have to face resistance within their organization, if they become inspired and they push forward, then it helps chip away at the resistance. I'll just share this little interesting story that happened in Philadelphia. I'd met Derek Pitts because I was on a local television program when I started Mainline MUFON. And I knew he had an interest in the subject because he agreed to come on the television program and talk about crop circles. This is back in the early 2000s. Then one of his assistants, who's in charge of education at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, Derek also does a major program on NPR, Skywatch, What to Look in the Night Sky. Derek was given a book by one of his assistants who does education at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. He came to one of our conferences where Leslie Kean was speaking. He bought our book, he read it, he turned it over to Derek Pitts. Lo and behold, I get this email from this guy who's in charge of education telling me tomorrow night at 7:00, Leslie Kean is being interviewed at the Franklin Institute. And I went, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's incredible. Why didn't I know about this before? So I immediately, went on my internet networks. I emailed everybody I knew. I just thought this was incredible. I planned with a group of girlfriends to go, and I show up and there are like 15, 20 people in an audience that seats 150. And they're all there because I emailed them. They all knew me. When I walked into the Franklin Institute, I said, hey, I'm here for the Derek Pitts, Leslie Kean thing. Where is it? They didn't even know it was happening. They were like, oh, that's not happening. We don't have anything going on tonight. What are you talking about? UFOs. I had to find it. They said, well, there's something going on in an auditorium in the back. It's like some private group meeting. This was not, it was a public event. It took me 15 minutes to find the auditorium because nobody would direct me there. I found out later that the board at the library would not let Derek Pitts promote the event because of funding and stigmatism and all sorts of issues like this.
Percolates.
Yeah. There was the same thing in the Free Library of Philadelphia. There's a whole group of guys who they're called Syriologists. They study the ancient Sumerian, cuneiform text, and there's a large, archive file there that was donated by a collector. Nobody knows about it. These cuneiform tablets stay hidden. We wanted to do a whole program there with Zach Sitchin when he was alive. He came there and spoke, and we were working with the Free Library of Philadelphia. They promoted that for him to come and speak as part of their author series. But as soon as we started to press a little deeper and we wanted to work with the board at the library and we wanted to have, be able to look at the cuneiform private collection that they have and have Zach come and speak, it was like, oh, no, that's going too far. Can't do that. Same thing at University of Pennsylvania. They have lots of interesting artifacts. I'm a supporter of them. I go to their university museum. You know, and Zach led a trip there, a small private trip when he spoke in Philadelphia. But we wanted to do something public with the university library. We wanted to do a UFO topic project as a fundraiser for the library, right? Or for the museum. Oh, no, can't go there. So
Hard to believe.
They say science progresses, say one funeral at a time. It's a lot of truths to that. There's a lot of truth to that. So unfortunately, it looks like Tracy Torme either didn't get the message or can't connect or didn't get the email link. I think he was going to join us as part of the filmmaking.
He was definitely going to be here. That's what he told me, and it's a
You want
shame.
me to try to call him? I can put myself on mute and give him a
No,
quick
we've
call.
tried, Jennifer. We've
Okay.
tried. He
That's
was
what I
confirmed
saw.
Something happened.
Yeah.
Peter, you talked about bringing people into the fold. I have that same vision when I think or approach this. But don't you feel that you find that most people have made up their mind and chose their side? They're either a believer or they're not.
I found that to be the case in the past, but that has changed in the last 4 or 5 years. We are in a decidedly different climate now, dramatically so. And that even those who absolutely knew that this is flights of fancy, nonsense, new age thinking, somewhat, charming, but naive, now know, if not otherwise, but that there is too much credible, scientific, historic, documentary evidence, and quite a bit of it now being championed by individuals. For example, this panel of former United States Air Force officers who are not just good witnesses, they're the kind of witnesses that you live for, especially in light of armchair researchers, especially in chat rooms on the internet that I occasionally observe when I'm a guest on a show, who are saying, any witness, their testimony has to be discounted or should be discounted because the classic example is when a car crashes and there are witnesses, everybody remembers something slightly different. Well, yes, but witness testimony in our culture for many hundreds of years is enough to convict somebody of a felony and sometimes a capital felony. There is witness testimony and witness testimony. I think what most people long for is trained observers, people who have a certain place in society that is less impeachable. Again, you may be, you don't like police officers or against the military, but in the general mindset, a police observation of a UFO or a bunch of military officers or enlisted personnel is often given more credibility than a bunch of civilians. I think part of that is, defensive thinking. I'm anxious about the subject. I'm uncomfortable with it. Therefore, even unconsciously, I like to undercut it in any way that I can. But gee, a bunch of retired Air Force officers all giving the same testimony on incredibly related incidents that run the same kind of gamut. For example, in 1987, several very important books came out and affected UFO studies. Bud Hopkins' Intruders, Timothy Good's Above Top Secret, and Whitley Strieber's Communion. Communion by far made cultural changes, in part because Bud Hopkins had connected Whitley up with an artist who designed that cover. Interestingly, nobody has ever reported a alien, for lack of another word, I've never been very comfortable with another intelligence that looks like that, quite like that. And
Right.
so Whitley ended up getting several thousand letters, and Bud certainly several hundred. I know because I answered a lot of them. Dear Mr. Hopkins, the one that I saw was so much like that. However, it didn't have a pointy chin. It didn't have a nose. Its eyes were not quite like. And in doing so, kept coming back to the description of the archetypical gray, which we already had a history with. But that book was an international bestseller, and it sold some millions of copies around the world. And that was the trigger for a lot of people to, oh my God, I have a confirmation in the real world of literature. The reason I bring it up is because Whitley was the best known, most successful fiction writer ever at that point to come forward and say it happened to me. And this is what happened. And that was a game changer. People in public life that have had these things happen are often understandably more reticent to put themselves on the line with their experiences. And I respect that.
Understood. Bob, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Oh, gosh. How much time do we have? Yeah, I mean, the whole issue of this being controlled by the media. Like I said, if Disney had put that out like with any of their normal programming, it would have gotten a lot of attention. So there's this whole issue of certain books, certain films, certain things that suddenly hit the media or promoted in the right way that capture the attention. I mean, this is the way that the whole UFO field needs to kind of stay in the forefront. But we see right now in cable, like the program Ancient Aliens, even though it's, I've got some issues with it, but it's still is a highly watched program and gets a lot of attention and keeps the topics in the forefront. And this is kind of what we need, is that whatever forces control the media need to kind of open up and make more of these programs available and just keep the topic in the forefront of the media. And that's been happening a little more and more, especially with the government's disclosure back in 2017 with admitting that we've photographed some of the stuff and it's real. So I see it slowly evolving and more acceptance by the public, and there's more media shows about it. You go to Amazon Prime and there are dozens and dozens of UFO themed programs available. But I think it just needs to, catch on with the main media for the ABC, CBS, CNNs, MSNBCs to come out and promote more of the stories, like the conference that just occurred in DC. Hardly got any promotion or saying, and it was a big story from former military people to bring this out, and it should have gotten more major media coverage. So, like I said, there are forces that are embedded within the major media that are to some extent controlling this. So we just have to hope that they, in some sort of wisdom, will eventually make this whole topic more public accessible. And
what do you guys think, Peter? Do you think that this stuff's being suppressed?
Oh, yes, certainly. And I think if we go back to the baseline and 1947, presidency of Harry Truman, a truly anomalous object crashes some miles from a then small town in New Mexico called Roswell, probably brought there because of its inhabitants' culture's interest in our early development of nuclear weaponry. In the summer of 1947, there was only one nuclear strike force in the world, the 509th Bomb Wing of the 8th Army Air Force. And in fact, the aircraft that bombed Hiroshima originally left from the only still standing World War II era hangar in Roswell, New Mexico. But how can I say, those people that Truman surrounded himself with for advice on what to do. Imagine that you were one of them for a moment and you're already at the top of the pile of, the world of science, espionage, of whatever area of specialty, economics, right up there in the inner circle, right around the president, and you are asked to be part of the most secret cabal imaginable and to advise the president after X number of months of study what he should do. Well, after X number of months of study, you don't know, and you still don't know what the hell you're dealing with. Everything I've read about and by Harry Truman suggests to me that if he had been left to his own devices, he might have been that person who, let's say in early 1948, went before the microphones and said to, every radio station in the country and by extension the world, ladies and gentlemen, it is my solemn duty to tell you that these so-called flying saucers, some of them are absolutely representative of advanced technologies and other civilizations off planet. Welcome to the brave new world. Can you imagine how differently our world would have evolved, and probably for the better? However, it didn't happen. And as Richard Dolan kind of brings together in his very important pair of books, UFOs in the National Security State, Part 1 and 2, Part 3, deliverable at some point in the future, that grain of sand that caused the irritation in the historic oyster, that started to calcify, that core secret that set off the whole national security state world that we essentially now live in, was not secrets about our nuclear weaponry. It was that secret. We don't know what to say, so we've got to lie about it and buy time. And here we are 75 years later. And what do? Well, we're still buying time.
Yeah.
It started to leak out, Ron, but we can't admit it, in part because, let's just say, that up president, who cares which one? It could have been the last one or this one or the next one, could possibly go forward. And I don't think they could without coordinating it with every world leader, with the leading figures in science, in psychology, in astronomy, in economics, in world affairs. It would have to be a worldwide decision. But let's just say the president goes forward. He's got this crazy idea and he just does it and doesn't tell anybody. We're not alone. He would be saying, in effect, that every president, since and including Harry Truman, has been an unindicted co-conspirator in the greatest cover-up in human history. And that little president's club, even including the families of the dead ones, they're very touchy about stuff like that. They like to keep their images nice and clean. Who cares what party or political affiliation they have or feel? Let's just not rock that boat quite yet. So we are in this conundrum. And, the wild cards are, I think, maybe some kind of huge WikiLeaks style type leak, or Pentagon Papers type leak.
Maybe
those are dated references now, but I think most people know what I'm talking about. Or, some cache of totally authentic photographs of the surface of the moon that show a blank load of anomalous objects and mining operations going back and still active. That
people
could do it.
Believe that though, Peter.
Well, that's just it. If there could be a way that it could be gilt edged, but now, of course, anything can be faked on film, moving and still. We all have our kind of BC ADs for that. For me, it was the first run of Jurassic Park.
Right.
And sitting in the Ziegfeld Theater by myself before I brought my dad back and watched it again. And for a split second, at that point when Laura Dern and Sam Neill are nursing that sick Triceratops, constipated, and the John Williams score comes up and the camera soars and there's the brontosauruses and all the beautiful music. A split second, I thought, oh my God, the secret of this film is not that CGI has gotten to this point. They found the effing island where the dinosaurs live. And then it disappeared. It was a moment, a childlike moment. I thought, oh my God, I can't ever trust another image that I see.
That's
So
right.
you're right there. The only other thing, the wild card is, They get tired of the game that's going on right now, and they pull the plug on it and basically say, here we are. Then things change.
That would be great. I want to let everybody know that Tracy Torme has in fact texted me. He actually got sick and was hospitalized. So.
Oh no.
Okay, but that is what happened. So we know. So
Oh, thank you for telling us. I will get in touch right after the show. I'm so sorry to hear that. Tracy is a dear friend, and he would have been, well, he's a legend, and he would have been such a valuable part of this
no doubt
wonderful panel, and a
Jennifer,
wonderful panel it has been.
What Peter was saying?
Yeah. Well, the topic in your question was, what is it going to take, to get disclosure out there? And I think it's kind of a real, like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And we've been seeing this for decades. Even with December 16th, 2017, of course, I think it was 2016, you've got, Luis Elizondo coming forward. So then as we go into the spring of 2017, it's all over the media, it's all over the news. And Luis Elizondo is the one person out there speaking about it, right? I don't know if you noticed, but it took 2 years for the Navy to, of course, they released the gun camera footage. Harry Reid was instrumental in that. Luis Elizondo didn't want to come forward unless he got Pentagon permission to have proof of what he's talking about, because he could, he wanted to really break it open. So there's people within these clandestine groups that want this information out there. Then there's other people that go, oh, no, we got to hold this back. So it took 2 years before the Navy gave the pilots permission, even though their gun camera footage was released. It was May 2019 before the Navy finally said, oh yeah, pilots can now report what they see. And then boom, David Fravor and Kevin Day are all over, all the news programs. But that took 2 years. So that's kind of the cat and mouse game you see, or the chess game you see played in the open media. A lot of people don't really kind of put 2 and 2 together and think about that. But David Fravor and Kevin Day were being asked all the time, to go speak. And they said, well, I don't have clearance. They did a couple of things in the dark, right? Where you only see their silhouette and their voices masked and everything. But until they got permission, they couldn't speak. And that speaks right back to the event that just happened October 19th, where these people spoke at, former people guarding, Minuteman missiles in the 60s. They still can't really legitimately speak. And they say in their testimony at the National Press Club, if I'm given immunity, if I'm given clearance, I can tell you more. This is what I'm willing to tell you right now. But it's, usually deathbed confessions when this stuff leaks out.
Ron, on that auspicious note, I must jump.
Okay. You have to dash.
Well, we should take a break now anyway. I think that's good. Let's stop there. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back here at 6 o'clock. Jennifer will screen the updated version of her documentary on Travis Walton, the true story of Travis Walton, and we'll pick it up there. We'll meet everyone back here in the auditorium at 6 o'clock.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.